Next, we'll move on to Graeme Cunningham. Graeme is part of the Energy Solutions team at Modern Niagara, Canada's largest mechanical and electrical contractor. With more than a decade of experience supporting sustainable development and renewable energy, Graeme has a passion for climate action and energy efficiency, which he brings to working with Modern's clients, helping them to design, develop, and deliver deep energy retrofits and decarbonization of their properties. So Graeme will be leading us through the energy retrofit planning and implementation process. Graeme, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate it. Yes, it's certainly something I'm personally very passionate about and happy to share with everyone here some of our experiences and being involved in some of these deep energy retrofit projects, specifically in the residential space. And maybe to begin, we could talk a little bit about the process of getting started. If you're on a condominium board yourself, or maybe a property manager that's working with a condo board, as we look at it, there's really two requirements. One, aging equipment that requires replacement, and specifically equipment that could benefit from replacements that would deliver energy savings, carbon emissions reductions relative to the equipment that's currently in place, number one. And number two is really the vision and commitment to taking a proactive approach to addressing those replacement needs, as opposed to the conventional practice in the residential space of waiting until a piece of equipment fails and then quickly trying and find a solution that you can undertake to replace that in a short order without disrupting too much on building performance. So aging equipment and vision and commitment to setting in place a long-term plan. Those are really what you need. Then what we would advise is, if you're on a board or if you're a property manager, inviting in a design engineer firm, mechanical electrical contractor, or in this case, I think someone like an energy as a service provider, like an Efficiency Capital, as an example, to bring in to speak with the board, or maybe even with the entire ownership group, about how such a process would work at your building specifically, to get the buy-in of the community, to make sure that everyone's on board with the process moving forward. And so to talk a bit more about that process, it really begins with baselining, getting an accurate picture of the current energy performance at the building. This typically involves conducting an ASHRAE energy audit. The level of that audit depends perhaps on the objectives that you might be looking at with the building. This is typically a prerequisite in working with a financier or project developer like an Efficiency Capital, would be completing that energy audit to understand the baseline consumption and the equipment at the space. That exercise would typically include identification of energy conservation measures, or ECMs, that could be implemented to replace the existing equipment that would deliver the energy savings that you'd typically be looking for these deep energy retrofits. Here I cite energy conservation measures, but oftentimes in projects like this, we look to introduce other solutions that would deliver utility cost savings, things like plumbing and water management, that are low-cost measures that would deliver high savings, that could create a space within a financing budget to cover the cost of more capital-intensive equipment replacements. So that's often included in the identification and catalog of different measures we might look at. We then typically would look at a long-term roadmap, where we would, over a series of years, identify and plan for the end of life of various different assets, and put in place a multi-year plan, potentially, for replacement of that equipment. Oftentimes in this instance, we're typically creating not just a window of time for when that equipment can be replaced, but an advanced window as well too, where we would instruct our partners to keep an eye out for incentives that could be available that would give additional impetus to replace that equipment a little bit ahead of schedule. That's often a key part of developing the case for these projects, is looking at incentives and grants that could be available to bring down that barrier to entry, to support the project development costs. And a key part of this, an example right now, is the Deep Retrofit Accelerator Initiative, which is launched through Natural Resources Canada, can support this first phase of the auditing ECM business case development plan, such that a lot of those project costs could be covered through these DRAI programs, with the remaining costs then, which would be on the condo board to commit to, should they choose not to move forward. It reduces the risk associated with this initial planning and development phase. What we would typically do at the end of that auditing business case development exercise is we would sit down with the ownership group, with the condo boards. Maybe this is at an AGM with all owners. We would present the results of those audits, the recommended strategy on moving forward. There could be a review of what the like-for-like equipment replacement costs might be, and then one or two pathways, perhaps, to deliver either the energy savings that are required, or if we're looking at a decarbonization project, which measures would be required to deliver that. Then we would get, then it would be up to the board rather to decide on how best to proceed. And if they choose to proceed with, if they choose one of the pathways to proceed, we would then be working with either the contracted party to deliver it, or maybe with the financier who's financing the project. That board would then enter into an agreement with the service provider and the contractor for the design, build, construction of the project. We then proceed to the design phase and then construction of the project. This typically involves a number of different parties that could deliver the solution. It's important for the board to work with, whether it's the project developer in the form of the financier or with the design build contractor, to ensure that the implementation of these projects mitigates the negative impacts on the occupants in the building. So this might be timing equipment replacements for off-season, replacing chillers in the winter, replacing your boilers in the summer, as an example, to try and reduce the negative impacts on the tenants and occupants in the space. I think a key part to keep in mind too is that these projects oftentimes will carry performance guarantees to ensure that you're hitting the energy consumption targets that were set out at the outset of the project. So it's important to work with a partner that's going to be able to provide long-term operations and maintenance on the newly installed equipment to ensure that you're hitting your energy consumption targets and that you're not going to be overexposed. Typically, this would involve long-term measurement and verification as well to ensure that you're reporting to any third parties from whom you received financing or grants and incentives. There are often measurement and verification requirements to report to those parties to ensure that you're receiving your funding. So